Caitlin, listen, there's a lot to discuss. There's going to be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking about what happened. And look, also in Georgia, this could go to a runoff, so it's not over yet. We won't know for weeks.
Yeah, it could potentially be weeks. That's something people have been bracing for. At least it won't be in January. It'll be actually in December this time. So who better to discuss all of this than Jeff Duncan, the Lieutenant Governor of Georgia? What do you see? Do you think a runoff is going to happen?
Well, statistically, it certainly looks like a runoff. There's only a handful of votes left. I think 4% heavy inside the metro area. So, yeah, it does feel like it's going to go to a runoff.
You said not that long ago that you were not going to vote for Herschel Walker or Raphael Warnock. Does that change if the balance of power in the Senate depends on this race?
So my actual answer was I didn't respect Herschel Walker yet, and he had not earned my vote, and I was not going to vote for Raphael Warnock. So we still have 4 more weeks. But, you know, I think a lot of Republicans like me are waking up this morning going, what could have been? What could have been if we would have picked a better candidate that could have won with a margin like Brian Kemp? That would have been able to put real leadership on display, real ideas on display, win the hearts and minds of Georgians, and get the state back to being fully red.
And Brian Kemp had this resounding victory despite the fact that Trump, had once predicted he was going to go down in flames at the ballot box. He defeated his Trump-backed opponent in that primary, and then, of course, he had a big victory last night. What message does that send, do you think?
I think it sends a message to the country, along with some other states, that this is truly a pivot point for the Republican Party. This is a time that Donald Trump is no doubt in the rearview mirror. And it's time to move on with the party. It's time to move on with candidate quality. It turns out Mitch McConnell knew what he was talking about candidate quality. We've seen it in Georgia and other places around the country where if they would have just woke up 12 months ago and stopped taking his lead and took the lead of what real Republicans, real conservative policies meant and mattered, we'd be in a different place.
We're still waiting to see what happens with the Senate, of course, and with this runoff. We're also still waiting to actually see who controls the House. It seems like it's going to be Republicans. That remains to be seen. Do you think Trump had the worst night, though, by far of anyone else last night?
I wouldn't want to be the one delivering him the news last night or this morning as to what the results were of the candidates they supported and poured money into. But, it's time to turn the page. I'm ready to move on. And who knows? I think Donald Trump's moving from a movement to a distraction for the Republican Party now.
We'll see if others agree. Obviously, he had a hold on those primary voters, just not the general election voters. He was not in Georgia in the last several weeks for this race. Neither was President Biden, noticeably. Do you think that changes if there is a runoff in the state? Will we see President Biden or former President Trump in the state?
Actually, it was months. From my recollection, it was months. I don't think there was any campaign that wanted Donald Trump to show up, or Joe Biden for that matter. They were both toxic down the stretch. Look, I can't imagine anybody would think Donald Trump would be a tailwind to Herschel Walker's campaign in a runoff scenario. I can't imagine anybody doing that calculus, except for one person, and that would be Donald Trump.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see who is going to potentially control the Senate because of this, if there is going to be this runoff that they had been hoping to avoid, and whether or not Kemp not being on the ticket, if there is a runoff, if that affects how Walker does.
Yeah, there was 200,000 folks by quick math this morning that were ticket splitters that voted for Brian Kemp and specifically voted for Raphael Warnock and not for Herschel Walker. I think there's some time to still tell if this is in the balance, right? This runoff could be 2 separate scenarios. If it is the balance of the Senate, it's a national race again, hundreds of millions of dollars pour in. If it ends up not being in the balance, then it's back to small dollar donations and barbecues, 7 times a day and good old-fashioned runoffs.
When I asked Governor Kemp if he had heard from voters who were splitting their tickets, voting for him but voting for Warnock, he said he would leave that up to the focus groups to determine, what the thinking was there. Jeff Duncan, thank you for joining us on this.
Absolutely.
So let's go to CNN's data reporter, our senior data reporter, Harry Enton, at the Battleground desk. So here's the question, right? You saw what happened with Governor Ron DeSantis. Won, right? Resounding victory. So did support for Trump cost the GOP votes?
I don't think there's any doubt that it did, Don. Donald Trump, let's start off with just a straight fact. Donald Trump is not a well-liked politician. Look at how high his unfavorable rating is nationally. Look at this. 58% unfavorable, just 39% favorable. And look how the people who held voters who had an unfavorable view decided to vote in this election. Overwhelmingly for Democratic candidates. Look at this margin, 77% to 20% just for the Republicans. But I think there's another way to sort of look at this. And essentially, let's say, who were the people that turned out to vote, right? And who did they say they supported back in the 2020 election? Normally, you would expect high Republican turnout with a Democratic president. But look here. Amongst those who turned out to vote, they said that back in the 2020 election, they favored Biden 48% to Trump's 44%, That 4-point margin basically matches what we saw 2 years ago. And if we look at those who said that they supported Joe Biden 2 years ago, how did they vote? How did they vote? It's a huge margin for Democrats, 92% to 7%. So basically, those people who said they voted for Biden 2 years ago stuck by the Democratic candidates for the House. And this was despite the fact, look how unpopular Joe Biden was. He had just a 41% favorable rating. So when you put it all together and you say, wait a minute, Joe Biden, the incumbent president, is quite unpopular. How did Democrats win? Well, or at least do better than expected? Well, it's because Donald Trump was in the minds of a lot of voters, and they decided, hey, we don't like that guy either.
Harry Enten, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Alice Stewart, to you. Money talks, and you're hearing from big Republican donors about where the money's going. What does that tell you about DeSantis? Is Ron DeSantis the next Republican nominee for president of the United States?
He's certainly rising in stature after tonight. And big money donors are telling me tonight they are ready to turn the page on Donald Trump. They now see he is an anchor on the party. And this is not just people that have not been supportive of Trump. These are Trump allies that have put big money into
That's a critical difference.
It's a big difference. They're realizing, look, under Trump, we lost the House, the Senate, and the White House.
Yeah.
And now we're in a critical midterm election, and his appointed candidates have lost significantly. The key thing with the DeSantis-Trump numbers that we saw tonight, that is imperative, and it's good for DeSantis, not good for Trump. That's a snapshot in time. I always like to look at the trends, and you look at the Real Clear Politics trends over the last few months. Donald Trump has lost in his numbers, and DeSantis has gained. And we're looking at Trump has lost about 5 points over the last 3 months. DeSantis has gained. And so if that trend continues, that levels out. And part of it because DeSantis has been a proven leader, he's a good fundraiser, and now he has risen to the stature of earning a nickname from Donald Trump. And that right there says a lot. Yes.
Maria, I want you to talk about the Latino vote because you've been very dialed into this both nationwide and in Florida. And the fact that our exit polls show that DeSantis won Latino votes in this election by 13 points, and contrast that with the fact that in 2020, Trump trailed Biden on the Latino vote by 7 points. That is a huge, that's a 20-point spread. That's a huge spread.
No, absolutely. And I think, again, like I said before, the Democratic Party has a lot of work to do with the Latino vote in Florida. And, you know, DeSantis should be given kudos for that, right? For reaching out to Latinos in Florida, very specifically, underscoring that the Latino vote is not monolithic. It's very different in Florida than it is everywhere else. Very, very heavy Cuban American, which traditionally has been conservative Republican. I think that was a big part of what happened. But DeSantis also got a lot of Puerto Rican voters. And that is traditionally a Democratic.
Not just Cuban,
exactly. But I want to say something about what Alice said. She talked about really big donors, and that's important. But I think the challenge for the Republican Party is Donald Trump may not care about the big donors because he has this list that is like a gamillion people.
Gamillion, that's a new one. Those are the words that come at 5:40 in the morning.
Exactly. That give him $5, $10, $30, $100. And as long as he has that, I don't think he's going to feel really all that beholden to these big donors.
I want you guys to look at this. Control Room, if we could pull up on the screen what Scott Jennings, who's a CNN contributor, but also a Republican strategist, very close to Mitch McConnell, tweeted tonight. This is what he writes, quote, how could you look at these results tonight and conclude Trump has any chance of winning a national election in 2024? Mia Love, as a Republican former member of Congress, what do you think?
Well, I've been saying this. I have been saying this over and over and over again. And this is just from facts and evidence that you have seen play out. One of the things that Ron DeSantis has done is that he has spoken. He's actually taken a cue from the Glenn Youngkin playbook. He is all about Florida all the time, every time you see him. It's all about the local politics, all about caring more for the people you represent than the person that you think represents your party. It is, again, people put way too much credit and effort into a person because they think that that's the leader of the party. Why not hold Trump beholden to the principles and the platform of the Republican Party?